Whoever has the cleanest hand should break them in half.
But like who has no sin throw the first stone or something? Is he, who has clean hands break the cookies?
So while you're up there, kill that recording thing. I should.
Okay, so you got it started? Oh yeah, we're 3 minutes in. All right, well, welcome everybody to what month are we in? March? March user group meeting. Woohoo, exciting. So yeah, Microsoft user group meeting. Thanks everybody for showing up in person. Thanks for, it doesn't look like we have a whole lot of people online today. Just those who are in the room.
Chris.
Yep, Chris and Chris. The double Chris's. Chris squared.
For you.
Right, as far as announcements go, we have less than a month now until our big, not SharePoint Saturday, not Microsoft Friday, not, I don't know, what other names have we had, to our Collab Days event.
Not communitydays.org thing.
Not Community Days.
Even though it's there.
So if you, yeah, get the word out. So next month, April 19th is when we're going to, Friday the 19th, we're going to have our big event. Got speakers from 3 different countries flying in, 3 different continents flying in. Going to be talking to us about Microsoft and SharePoint and all sorts of wonderful things. And yeah, it's a totally free event. We'd love to have as many people there. Yes, there's the link. Thank you so much, Christian, putting a link in there. We want as many people as we can to register, to show up, to participate in this. If you know of anybody who'd be interested in sponsoring the event, getting their name up on the big board, love to have some more of them too. But really, it's just an opportunity to get as many people in the community together and talking and presenting and getting to know each other. Big networking event. So really, it works out best if we have more and more people there. So tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your boss, tell whoever you need to tell. You don't have any friends, you know, you've got some of those other things.
Everybody's covering fabric.
Fabric? I don't think we had.
We have some Power BI stuff. I think there's a specific thing on fabric.
There might be one of the dev tracks.
I thought I remember hearing one.
Yeah.
It was more of an integration, like how do you use Fabric to bring in another, like a SharePoint library or some sort of cross communication like that. That's what I remember. Yeah, so that's the big announcement. Do we have other announcements? Is there other event? Greg, you always know.
I just posted another link. So next Friday, next week, Friday the 5th, is SQL Saturday on Friday in parentheses, at the same location as our M365 event. So if you're interested in that one, I'll be there most of the day.
Awesome.
So that may dissuade some people from attending, but I will be there.
I mean, they don't have to talk to you while they're there. They could, you know, go do productive things.
That's true.
I'll be there too. So.
Greg will also be there. So you got 2 people to avoid while you're there.
And Greg, I'm thinking we should bring some flyers and do some, you know, some promotions trying to get people to register there. So that's my primary reason for going.
I could.
It's good. All right, so event next Friday. Then 2 weeks after that Friday on the 19th is our event. Anything else going on? We're coming up on summer. There's usually a lot of summer code camps and stuff like that. So keep an eye out on geek events and different places like that. There's usually a lot of good summer camps, especially for kids and learning and stuff like that. So that's a good thing to keep an eye on. Yeah, we will not be having a normal user group meeting on the 4th Tuesday next month because we're substituting our big Collab Days event instead. So if you've got that on your calendar, go ahead and hide that one or whatever, move it up a week. And then we'll be back in May with our normal, regularly scheduled program, same bat time, same bat channel.
Can you make those cookies? Yes. Those of you that are remote and not in the room, Greg made some delightful cookies.
I need to get down off the stage so I can go sneak one of those cookies.
They're about the size of a 35-inch tire off a Jeep Wrangler, and they're tasty.
So, all right, if there's no more announcements, I will go grab one of those cookies. We'll turn the time over to our very own Greg McMurray. You can introduce yourself, I guess, if you want to. Usually people have slides where they introduce themselves, so I'll let you go ahead and do that. But thank you very much. I don't know if you're going to be leaving time at the end for questions or anything, but we'll just turn that over to you.
As much as everyone wants to hear me drone on forever, so. All right, let's see what happens if I share my screen. And start a presentation. I know the people in the room can see it. Online, are you looking at me standing at the podium, or do you see my screen?
No, we see the screen and you at the podium.
Ooh,
We're
very nice.
blessed.
You get it all. Okay, well then we're going to call that good. So first slide is very boring. Who am I? I think a lot of you probably know me, but I've been doing technology for 26 years, I think. Had an experience in a lot of different industries. I'm currently the director of IT and software development at Barco Rent-a-Truck. I've been there for about 1.5 years, and it is a very cool little company. I am also the co-founder of a consulting company, and really I'm the only one that works there now. I bought my brother out many, many years ago, and so do that on the side occasionally. I've been a board member of Utah Geek Events, president of this user group, and the Power Apps and Dynamics 365 user groups locally as well. And I think many of you probably know how to find me online. If you don't, the best one by far is probably LinkedIn, but you can find me other places. We are hiring at Barco. There's a couple of positions open. There's a developer position that's not listed that we're recruiting actively for. If you know anyone with Business Central experience, they're pretty hard to come by. But yeah, if you know anyone, I would love to talk to them. So that's a little bit about me. What we're going to be talking about today is basically how we can improve the development lifecycle with the Power Platform. There's a couple things that get in the way, and each of these slides I put a pop culture reference. So there's the challenge accepted sign. Anyone recognize something famous? Someone saying challenge accepted. I was thinking about, oh, Eric, How I Met Your Mother. You get a cookie. So yeah, Barney would often say challenge accepted. So what are the challenges we're trying to do here? There are a couple of challenges with the Power Platform that make really accelerated development difficult. So the first one is that the low code tends to be very interactive driven. You're often clicking things with a mouse. You're configuring things through a web page. It's not development in the typical Hollywood-esque dark room, person in a hoodie hacking away at a keyboard, sort of thing. It's a very different approach. And a lot of that also means that it's kind of hard to follow some best practices for other areas of software development, in part because it's a young platform relative to software development, but also because it's very different. So how do we actually increase our velocity? And there's 3 things I highlighted here that we'll talk about, and that is doing incremental changes, automating what you can, and one of the biggest obstacles of all is in the Power Platform, you have what I call a single object definition. So in your dev environment, you have your table you're defining, that's the only place it lives. You don't have it in a shared code repository typically or something like that, that it can be really challenging to work around those. So how do we do that? How do we move on from these challenges? So the quote for this page is the best of the best of the best, sir. Anyone get that reference?
Only the best movie ever.
It is one of the best movies ever. What is it, Kevin? MIB, The Men in Black. So thank you. So Microsoft's best practices, they're trying to help us out in doing a better job with the Power Platform. And some of the things I've highlighted here, the very first one, avoid using the default environment. I say don't, but there are times that it is completely unavoidable. For example, if you're configuring a SharePoint flow, there's no other way around it. You have to use the default environment. But for most other things, you can avoid using the default environment, and it's definitely recommended to do that. The default environment has a lot of really weird restrictions around it that will inevitably come to bite you. Its database can be, I think it's limited to like 1 gigabyte or something. It's a very small number. You can't really do backups and restores of it. Like there's just a ton of limitations that you just avoid it. I would highly recommend using a service account to own objects, especially flows. And the reason why is if you go and create a flow, even not in the default environment, you're like, hey, I'm not using the default environment. I gotta be doing this right. And your account, for whatever reason, you leave the company, maybe, is deactivated, that flow gets deactivated as well. And so that is usually not the desired behavior for a company when someone leaves the company. So typically for these shared objects, you definitely want a shared account owning them so they don't encounter problems down the road. I think for flows, it has to be an actual account. And one of the reasons for that is you may also want to license it separately so it can be the run as user. I don't think it can be just a principal. I think it has to be tied to an identity. I'm not sure.
You can cut out activities and put those in either a custom connector or an API and leverage the service principal that way.
Yes, inside that you can, for sure.
But the actual API has to have a connection, or the actual flow has to have a connection that's owned by a user.
Yeah. And I think it does come back to licensing reasons why that's the case, but.
This would be a good point to
Yeah.
say don't ever use a service account. Multiplex your license and be in trouble.
Yeah, and you only get so many run actions too, so. Use a vendor prefix instead of the default new. If you don't know what this is, it's when you're creating objects in the Power Platform. By default, they have a prefix that gets associated with them, which is actually a great thing because what it means is vendors that you're installing something from an app source repository or maybe a zip file that they've provided, their prefix ideally is in there and it will never collide with any of your objects. So it's good to use something unique. One tip I would offer is keep it short. You can actually set it to anything you want, but keep it short because that's going to show up everywhere on all of your column definitions and a lot of other places. And it also will make your API calls really chatty and chew up a lot of extra bytes. So, if you've got an abbreviation for your company or something, use that, keep it small. A really, really good practice is to isolate your changes in a development environment, extract those in what's called a managed solution. I actually have some demos coming up where I'll show exactly what that is. But the Power Platform makes it really easy to go in and say, oh, I got an error in this flow that's running. I'm just going to go edit it in live and fix whatever's wrong. And that's going to add what they call an unmanaged layer. But suddenly, that unmanaged layer will always be at the top of your stack. So if you push any other changes from your other environments, it still wins and your changes don't show up. So get in a good practice of using managed solutions and logical grouping and separation of components. So these solutions, they basically package up your tables, your flows, views, forms, all of this stuff, your Power Apps, all of the good pieces that are part of the Power Platform. And you want to kind of have them a little bit separated. So one of the things that we've done is we have one called customizations where we put things like our tables, forms, views, etc. And we have another one for our processes, which is the flows. And then we have a third one, which is actually for our plugins. And what it allows us to do is kind of manage them independently. And if we're working on plugin code and want to deploy it, we can deploy it independently of the other updates. Or if there are dependencies, then we track them and we say, okay, this plugin depends on this field being there. So we're going to go add that to our customizations first. We're going to make sure to push it upstream so it's everywhere it needs to be, and just move forward. The Power Platform will actually track those dependencies for you as well. And it will not let you typically push code that it can detect has a dependency that's unsatisfied. So there are ways you can be really clever and break it. Don't try to be really clever and break it. Eric.
Are there best practices around what to use the Power Platform versus Logic App? Better platform?
You know, I don't know as though I have a great answer for that. I think part of it comes down to just how you want to manage it within your business. All flows are, in fact, Logic apps. And so part of it comes down to a Logic app, you're going to pay every time you run it. Whereas with a Power Automate flow, typically you get, you know, X number of actions / runs as part of your licensing. So, you know, typically you've already have included runs for Power Automate. It's easier to get started. But you may also hit limits that are annoying to work with. And with the Azure Logic apps, if you have a predictable workload, you can say, okay, this is what it's going to cost me, you know, every month or however often you've predicted it to do its thing. So, yeah. Because otherwise they're basically identical. If you know, the Logic apps is slightly more bare metal just because you're working just one layer down from Power Automate, but I have never seen anything you can do in one you can't do in the other. But I'm sure there's something.
I think with Flow, there's a maximum number of parallel processes that you can spin off if you're doing a for each loop kind of a thing. With Logic apps,
It'll scale as much as you're willing to pay.
Yes.
That's probably true too.
That's about the only thing.
Yeah, it would have, I would imagine it certainly has higher limits. So, great question though, Eric, thank you. And do keep the questions coming. I'm happy to be interrupted anytime. So, the last thing I was going to mention is patches. So we talked about solutions as kind of being a container, a logical container for all of your code. Patches are kind of the same thing, but just for a specific change. So patches are tied back to solutions, and you can think of a patch saying, hey, I need to add a new field to this table and to this form. I could go add that in a patch, which is associated with that solution, and then I can deploy just that patch, which is much faster and a much smaller code change to make that work. And I will have a demo for that as well, just so everyone knows. Any questions on any of those best practices? No, we'll keep rolling. All right, so you're simply the best. I do see some smiles. Meredith, you know this one.
You're simply the best.
Oh, now you'll sing for us, Christian. Tina Turner, thank you. So the industry, you know, in software development and IT generally have come a long way over the years in developing best practices. So I have a lot of those listed here. You know, it's very popular to do Agile or Scrum these days. We were talking before the meeting about change management and how that's a blessing and a curse. Version control, I cannot imagine doing any software development without some sort of version control. Continuous integration, continuous delivery. I'm going to show how to approximate some of that with the Power Platform, as well as, you know, testing it. So these are things that, you know, the Power Platform, I'm going to argue, does a terrible job of. And things where we have to kind of plumb in our own best practices to make sure that we're doing the best work that we can do. Exactly. So how do we increase our velocity? Who knows who that is there? I mean, we've got a room full of nerds. Come on. This is Wharf, of course. Velocity is increasing. There's a YouTube video that I'm not going to watch from Christian in the chat, but everyone else is welcome to. But these three things, I talked about it. That's why I'm not clicking it. Even if he calls it Tina Turner, I'm not clicking it. So I mentioned these early on. You know, how do we increase our velocity? We need to isolate our changes. We're going to try to do that through patches. Automation, I'm going to show you some PowerShell scripts that automate a lot of the things we've been talking about and how to work with that single object definition. And really that comes back to, you need to have a development environment where you can do that single object definition. You need to use managed solutions to then export those definitions to whatever other lanes you have. Certainly production, but ideally QA, staging, test, whatever you have it, user acceptance testing, whatever those other lanes are that you would have to verify that in. So looking at these, how do we do this? Who knows who that blue monster is? Meredith has all the answers today.
Sully.
It is Sully. Yes. And what is he doing? He's holding something open there. Do you remember this scene from Monsters Incorporated? So this is great. He keeps opening and closing the closet door saying, look, there's no monsters in here. It's empty, which, it's referring to the humans, which I think is just hysterical. Oh, I love it. So anyway, the empty patch. So the beauty of the empty patch, let me just tell you here, this is one of the, I think, most genius moments of all in regard to the Power Platform, is when you're using this approach, you create a new patch in your development environment, and you immediately deploy that patch to your other lanes. And the reason why that's so important is the Power Platform will keep track of the versioning of your solution, and it will not let you deploy things that don't have a higher correct version. And so your patches, as long as you continue to use a patch and you increment its version, you can keep deploying that patch forever. It becomes a whole deployment lane you can use forever. And your next change that comes along, you can create another patch, and it also lives on forever. But if you have those two patches and you're working on them in dev, and the second one finishes up first and you go to deploy it, your first one is now dead. It can never be deployed upstream because a newer patch version already exists out there in the Power Platform. So I will show you how to work with this, but that's the general idea, is to create an empty patch and deploy it immediately to your other lanes. There are a couple of gotchas that I will say you have to make sure you've satisfied. One is patches can only exist from a solution, so you got to start somewhere. You have to have a solution deployed out there as well. They also, if you're using the automation through PowerShell and you have a new connection that is part of your patch, it will not pop up the authentication dialog. So you'll still have to go into the Power Platform, either the Power Apps or powerautomate.com site, and authenticate that connection. So that is another gotcha we've encountered. And then not everything also will work in patches. So there are certain operations, like if you're deleting a column from a table, that don't work in a patch. And part of the reason is that is patches can be uninstalled. And so if you have a delete operation as part of your patch, how do you undo a delete? Like, there are ways, but it's very complicated, very expensive. It's much easier to say no. Once you have a column, you always have a column. Yeah, delete pretty much doesn't exist. So if you're going to do a delete, you have to use a full solution push. There are a couple of other places I've seen that are sort of weird, like I needed to turn on auditing for a table, so it had an audit log of the changes that were happening to it. For whatever reason, that change does not get persisted in a patch. I even exploded the patch, looked at the XML definition, changed the bit that was in there and pushed the patch. It ignores it. Yeah, you cannot change certain table level attributes through a patch either. So once in a while, you will need to do a full solution push. And one of the things we do is we keep track of a development card that is for our next full solution push, where we're like, here are all the things that we need to make sure we do with this next full solution push when we schedule it, which takes a lot longer. So our patches typically are deployed on the order of seconds, so fast, very, very fast. When we do full patches, it is usually about a 4 to 5 hour process of somebody lightly babysitting it and watching it. And so it's also after hours, and it's hugely annoying. But the benefit is, if we're following our process and all of our patches have gone out, there are also 0 surprises that go out with the full solution push. because everything has already been deployed. So it's a great practice. I know that's probably a fresh concept, but does anyone have questions on the empty patch? No? Keep going. I'm going to show it, yeah. So to get started, I've only got like 3 more slides, and then we're going to do demos. Trying to make sure that we're all on the same level here. So the first thing that's very important is don't be scared. I don't have a pop culture reference for these slides because it's code. But I should have done, like, I don't know, the guy from Jurassic Park that's saying or something. I don't know. Anyway, so this will all be PowerShell for the most part, or command line driven stuff, because if you can type it, you can automate it. And so that's going to be where a lot of this power comes in. So a couple things. One is this is a community project that's built on work that Microsoft has done. And so if you Google microsoft.xrm.data.powershell, that is the community project that wraps the microsoft.xrm.tooling.crm connector.powershell project. And one of the gotchas right there is currently it only works in the original Windows PowerShell, so version 5, if you're familiar with it, not the newer PowerShell core that would be versions 7 or 8 that you might see floating around. There is an in development branch of it that I've got listed here on the slides that is available for testing if you need to use it with the newer PowerShells, but it hasn't been released yet. So there's 3 things you may need to do on your system to ensure that it works. The first one is to adjust your execution policy. And in PowerShell, what that is it's a security measure that basically says, what scripts am I allowed to run? And that's a good thing because PowerShell is very powerful and can be used by the bad guys to automate things too. So it comes shipping out of the box in a very secure way. And so what you need to do is say, hey, for this session that I'm going to be running in, I want to allow local scripts to be able to run. Scripts that I'm writing, scripts that I'm authoring, I want to be able to run those. So that's that first command there, the set execution policy. It is just for your current user. The second one is the older .NET that this runs on, 4.8. There were some quirks with enabling TLS 1.2 and the PowerShell gallery where it will pull these down from by default only listens using TLS 1.2. So older web protocols, it does not listen to and it will break. So you'll get a really weird error message. But yeah, if you just paste that line into your PowerShell window, it'll work. And then the third one is to actually install the module. So you may already have your system configured. You can jump straight to the third one, but if you run into any problems, those first 2 will likely solve those problems. But just installing that module with that command will bring it into your current PowerShell instance where you can use it for automation.
You try to install that module with the minus user PowerShell.
Yes, and it does not work. Correct. I don't know what they did to break the compatibility layer, but it is. So, but yeah, it's there. Use the branch, do your testing. All right, so the next one, once you've actually got that into your PowerShell run space and you can use those commands, there are 3 that will help you get connected. The Connect CRM Online, and then there's a discovery version and an on-prem version. So it uses CRM as a broad term for the Dynamics 365 Power Platform, but it's what gets you connected to that environment. And so when you connect, I'll show you some examples on what that looks like to connect. If you use the online discovery version, it will actually pop up, well, in PowerShell, it will actually give you a text list, but it's similar to other automation where it pops up a window and says, which environment would you like to connect to? So basically, you authenticate first and then says, here's a list of all your environments that you're allowed to connect to. So it makes it interactive where you can choose. You don't have to know the magic URL. You can just say, discover them for me and connect. But it also isn't great for automation because it makes you choose something. So you don't want to have to choose something every time you run it. So the first one is the one that I use every day because I have my setup just automated and running and it's beautiful. Just as a reference, I deployed 2 patches from dev to production today. Loved it. So one other thing to note with these commands is by default, they store their connection information in a global variable that all of the other commands can use. But you can, if you need to store multiple connections, which would be the case if you've got like a development in a production environment, you can assign them to variables and reference them later. So there's some links there, and I'm happy to share these slides if anyone would like them after as well. The Power Platform CLI, so this is not specific to PowerShell. This is an installable command line program that you can get from Microsoft. And I copied and pasted from their webpage what it really is, but what we're going to focus on here, well, how you install it is you can either install it from their webpage with just an MSI installer, or if you're installing the Visual Studio Code extension, it automatically packages it up saying, hey, you're obviously doing development work, you need this tool. But the reason that it's very helpful for us is it allows us to unpack our solutions into their XML definitions, and then we commit those to our GitHub repository. And the reason we do that is, one, we've actually had a solution break before where we could no longer use it. It got corrupted somehow. And so if you've got an unmanaged version you have saved out, you can always import that back in after deleting the bad one with however references it got hosed up. The other thing that I think is even more valuable is we have over 200 flows in our environment, and somebody will say, why am I getting this email? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've got to go try to figure out which flow is generating this email. I can take something unique, maybe the subject line from the email, and search our source code repository, and it will show me the flow definition that matches. I'd be like, oh, I don't have to go digging nearly as deep. This is much easier to go figure out what's there and I get an answer or change an email or whatever it is that somebody needs. So being able to search your source code in the Power Platform is very, very powerful. So I'll give you a quick overview of that when we are done. Any question on any 3 of those before we drop out of boring PowerPoint and look at the actual more exciting demos? May the demo gods be with me. All right. Yes. All right, so here is my PowerShell window. We'll make it a little bit bigger and make the text nice and big so it's easy to see. Is that large enough for everybody? I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit. What I want to show here is this new CRM solution patch. Oh, actually, let me show you one other thing first. In my web browser, in my GitHub repository, I have a presentations repository, and these 2 code files are there. I have submitted one of them as a patch back to the Sean, can't remember his name, McNellis, that runs the main PowerShell one. I will submit the second one when it's done, but I keep having little tweaks to it that makes life better. So I haven't submitted it yet as a pull request, but maybe one day I'll get some internet points and be moderately famous and get my pull request merged into the main library. But yeah, you can find that there, and I'll put the slides there as well. But getting back to PowerShell, the CRM solution patch. So what I want to do actually first is here I have these 3 pieces of code, these 3 lines that I've highlighted, where I have a dev, test, and production variable that I'm saving connections to. And so when I run these, they're going to connect. I've already run them and I already have connections to them. So if I, actually look at it, I can see that I've got stuff in those variables. So I'm not going to actually run them again to connect. But just so you know, I have those already set up. So what I can do with this new CRM solution patch is, let me make sure it's in my run space here, is I can now do new CRM solution patch, and I can tell it what connection I want to use. So I'm going to use our dev environment and our patch name, and I'm going to do customizations, something like this. And it's unhappy about something here. CRM service not initialized.
ChatGPT. API?
No, I haven't. I have played around with it a little bit to see what it will create, and it's interesting.
Nice way to get strong about it often.
Yeah, it's not a bad place to start, but it's not. Okay. Yeah, it's a good place to start, but I feel like a lot of times it's better like as a reference, I'll say. All right, we're gonna start this over here. And reopen a couple of files for us. Well, we'll start. This one will get me far enough. I do have to re-authenticate. So now you get to see this in action, which means I also have to go find my password.
You start from your password.
It's true.
Dots, not stars.
Those are all bullets. Come on. All right, so it's doing the OAuth authentication. When I auth once, it's smart enough to remember that, and so it does pop up the dialog, but it immediately already has the right credential and is held onto it. So I have now held on to that credential. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to deviate slightly. Well, we'll stick with the plan. Come up to my downloads. New CRM solution patch. Run that, get it in here. Will it work? Actually, you know what? I'm going to do one more thing. So remember how I said you could save the variables and there would be a global variable if you don't save it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to let the global variable be dev and see if that helps it be happier. So new CRM solution patch and patch name, customizations. Oh, this is going to feel good. Except for I did something kind of dumb here. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add this verbose flag to the end so you can see what it's actually doing. So what it does is checks to make sure it's loaded. It finds the parent solution, customizations. So it just does some simple string splitting on the dot to find the parent. And you can see in our environment, found 39 solutions already, 39 patches, and the parent solution for customizations. It finds the current max version, which is the 1.129.40.0, and then it increments it to 41.0. So as long as I have that 41.xxx family in any of my deployment lanes, I can deploy these patches. So I can then go into our environment, I can add stuff in, etc., do all those good things. I'm going to go back over to my browser here, and I am going to grab this file because I don't know where it is on my disk at the moment. Come back in here. Whoops, not there. Paste it in here. And run this. And what I can do with this one, this push CRM solution patch, is we can pretend I've done all my work, and I can say I want to deploy customizations, if I can spell right. It is. So I'm going to grab the sample, and my source for that is going to be our dev environment, and the destination, because I said, hey, I want to do the empty patch everywhere first, is going to be test, prod. And so in PowerShell, arrays are defined just by using the comma. So it's also smart that it's basically going to say, I'm going to run this command twice, in essence, saying, hey, I'm going to float these two values in there and deploy it. And then just so you can all see, I'm going to do verbose, and then there's also, I'm going to make it synchronous. So it will wait for the deployment to finish in each environment before it moves on to the next. So if I hit go, we can see that it's doing a lot of the stuff that I would normally have to do through the UI. I would have to go into Power Apps, I would have to clone a patch, create it, I would have to then extract it, which takes a bunch of time before the download button even shows up. I download it, and I have to go look at what it named it because it names it something weird every time. And then I have to go take that and upload it into my separate environments by hand. So doing something like this means, you know, I was able to push this, and granted, I'm doing it synchronously, so it's taking a little bit lower. Oftentimes when I will push, you know, we've completed our testing and things look good, I'll do it asynchronously, and it's literally fire and forget. And, you know, obviously it takes some time in the cloud, but it's completed in under a second here locally. So fast. We can see it's already done in test. So there's not much to deploy because it's empty. It's just creating a patch out there, which I can then later even rename because I don't need to leave this demo one out there for this group, but I'll just repurpose it for a future development activity. But you can see just how quickly that goes. What I will do is I do want to show, see if I have a patch downloaded. I usually clean them up pretty well. I don't think I do. We'll download one. I want to show the last piece of this. So if we go log into Power Apps, go to our solutions, and we're in not where I want to be. Let's go to our sandbox. And let's do this flow right here. I want to export it. This is one that I already did today as well. So you can see here through the UI, it's much more annoying. This managed or unmanaged, this is kind of one of those important distinctions I mentioned earlier, but to reiterate it, if you're not familiar, the managed means my downstream things, I'm not going to edit it, modify it, whatever. Like the definition that is shipped out is the definition that it will be. Unmanaged is if I want to store a copy that I could later, you know, delete from my dev environment and re-import. Or maybe I've got a different development environment where I want to be able to continue working on it separately. That's when you would use unmanaged. So I'm going to export it as managed because that's what we would normally do. And you can see it takes forever. There's this little bar up here saying currently exporting. And we wait till the bar turns green. We still have one cookie left. Yeah, and there's enough calories in there, certainly. So there.
I'm still working on the first one I can't go for a second.
Yeah. All right, we've got the green bar, so I can hit download. And there it is. I told you it gets a weird name. So it's got all of this gobbledygook in there with a unique identifier. It's actually the unique name plus the version is what it truly is. But the unique name is kind of an internal identifier you don't really see very often, and the version you can see there, but you know, it's not something that's top of mind present for people. So what I wanted to show with that is this pack util. So the Power Platform API. And what it does is I typed pack earlier, you can see here in my shell, and it gives you this help. And so I can say, oh, I want to work with a solution. And so I do pack solution, and then it'll give me new help in theory. And it's like, here are the commands you can do with that. And so what I want to do is unpack it. So if I do unpack, it will then tell me what my parameters are that I can pass in. So I am going to look back here, and the first one is zip file, which has an alias shortened form Z. So we're going to do .z, and I don't remember if it needs a fully qualified path or not, but we're going to give it to it. So there's that big ugly zip I downloaded, and then it's going to ask me where I want to unpack it on my file system. So the folder, so -F, and I'm gonna just dump it out to C temp. Oh, we'll put it in my folder. C. Well, we'll see if that exists. We're gonna make sure that exists first. Chain these together so I don't have to type as much again. And then if I try to run this right now, it's going to complain about one more thing. By default, the pack command line assumes you're working with an unmanaged solution. So I have to tell it it's okay. I know that this is a managed one, and I believe that is -P, but we're going to look here. It's package type. Right here, -- package type. So its alias is -P. So P managed. And what this is going to do is explode that patch with all of its files. So we're going to open that in VS Code so you can see what it looks like. And here we can see.
You should take a bonus whether you trusted that.
I was just quick, man. I just muscle memory. Just trust it all. So if we look, here's the solution definition. So we can see it's patch for processes, blah, blah, blah. It's got some information in here that's, about the solution itself. And then down at the bottom, this is where it's saying it keeps track of dependencies. So it's saying I need to have this table of price quote template. I need to have leads, opportunities, quotes, and a connection reference for something that's obviously trying to connect. So those things you're not actually going to see as part of this patch because it's just dependencies that need to be satisfied. So if I try to install this somewhere that doesn't have those dependencies satisfied, the Power Platform is going to go, no, and not let me do it. So if we look in the actual customizations, super boring. But the interesting stuff, the reason I exported it was for the flows, here is the actual JSON definition for that flow. So I can see a copy of it. I can see exactly what all the actions are. It's kind of a pain to read if you're not familiar with it, but it's there. And the nice thing is, like I said, it's very searchable. So if I needed to say, hey, find an email subject or something like that to search it, that's where that is. And just to kind of show you guys, our repository, this is what we have. So we have exploded it where we have all of these workflows and their definitions. So if I come in here and I need to search this repository for, I don't know, we'll say duplicate, I can see everywhere that it pops up and I can go, oh, yeah, that's not what I'm looking for, not what I'm looking for, not what I'm looking, oh, there it is. And I can find it much faster than trying to click in the UI, wait for the flow definition to load, expand all the actions. Yes. So I don't know, for you guys, I'm curious, the new designer versus the old in Power Automate. There are things I like about the new one. I hate that it expands all of my conditions by default because we have some very large flows and it just brings my browser to its knees. Like it's unusable. So
when it starts to bring your browser to change the URL, it's a fast way to recover.
right, because it's got at the very end, it's like v3 equals true, and you just change that v3 equals false, and you're back to the classic designer, and it just works.
If you remove the v3 entirely, then you're right back where you started.
And it's a little bit of a crapshoot.
So I don't think there's a way to take that JSON output, plug it back into Power Automate.
There is. So you can export any flow and it will basically give you a zip package that has that definition in it. So you can, build your own version, if you will. The idea is that this is unmanaged stuff that we have exported and versioned. So I can come in with that pack command line utility and I can do pack and then solution instead of unpack. I can do pack and it will rebuild that zip file that I can then upload to a new environment.
The guy that's selling a solution that paid $1 million for it, automatically,
Yeah, it takes a little bit of elbow grease, but it just works. And so the idea is you want to automate the things that you can automate. Obviously, if I'm adding a field to a form, there are ways you can do it through the API, but I'm going to tell you right now, that's harder than actually going in with the mouse and just clicking the buttons to add it. So automate the things that make sense, but definitely using the solutions, using the patches, and then automating that extraction and push. It has saved us so many hours. It's not even funny. Like,
Run a time job to do a backup every night of all your solutions.
no, we don't. And part of the reason is if you do, anytime you extract a full solution, it will collapse all of your patches. So that's another gotcha is to be aware of is if you extract a full solution, new revision, it collapses all the patches into that, which is a good thing because then you can use that solution if you need to go delete a column, you need to reconfigure a table, you need to do any of those things that you can only do through a full solution push. That's how that becomes available to you to do down the road.
And as long as nobody goes co-pilot, cowboy, makes changes in production with that one process.
Right. And we've kind of set the schedule that about once a quarter, we want to do a full solution push. Just so we're not getting too far behind. We're not getting things stacked too deeply. Who is it? He's here in the community locally. Why can't I think of his name? He did a test in his Dynamics environment where he deployed patch on top of patch on top of patch to see if there was a point where Dynamics would break or slow down or do whatever. And I think he got over 1,000 layers before he gave up, saying there's no effect. Like when I roll the final solution out, it has to collapse all those. It might take a while, but as far as day-to-day use, it did not take any longer deploying patch 998 versus 999 versus 1000, as well as the actual performance of the application was unchanged. So you can use as many patch layers as you are comfortable using as long as they're all managed. Don't add unmanaged layers. So with that, I'm going to actually, are there questions before I jump back to the very end of the slides?
Really shy asking her questions.
You have been very shy. So the one thing I wanted to bring up is our next step is, of course it goes to the wrong slide, is Azure Automation Runbooks. So I really want to bake a lot of this stuff outside of my desktop. I don't want to have to remember on a new machine to configure PowerShell with those commands I showed you. I want to be able to configure a button that says new patch, and it asks me the name and I type it in, and off to the cloud it goes where it runs all of this. So stay tuned. I may come back for a future group showing that automation.
You could actually do your Azure runbook where you fill a form out on SharePoint with the patch.
Right.
And then it follows the runbook. To Azure column.
That's the goal, is just click and go. So yeah, that's what's next. And thank you. I'd love to connect. Do you have any other questions, anybody?
We've run into issues where it's like Power Platform becomes cost burden. Because anything that's really useful feels like it requires some premium licensing to get.
Yes.
How do you guys deal with that so it's not such a, or do you just pay the cost?
We mostly just pay the cost. So the idea is that we're already deriving other value from it in parts of the business. So for example, our sales organization uses the Dynamics CRM very heavily. And so they're already extracting a lot of business. They have licenses that cover their use, plus all of the activity we're doing developing around it. We have licensed some individual Power Apps plans that also give some things, which are, I don't know. Ask me on any given day if I feel like it's too expensive or not. Today I feel like it's medium expensive. It's $20 per month.
$20 per month
per user. Is no, that's a separate license.
If you're doing Power Apps against only M365 content like SharePoint, then it kind of is.
Yeah.
But as soon as you step outside of SharePoint, then it's no.
Pretty much. Yeah, it gets expensive fast. But yeah, we are all in on.
No, it's.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of different.
Not here for the word in times, but any word user benefited or data that was extracted or something. It was
Yeah.
something that made it sound like if you didn't have everybody.
Licensed, there could be an ugly gotcha.
And like so much else that Microsoft does, it's squishy.
It is very squishy.
And they don't stop you from running it. Yeah. And so you end up with 1,000 people running, they come in and run an audit and say, by the way, I'm showing you. I like it.
There's a little bit of cynicism there, but there's a lot of experience and wisdom too.
If you're going to run it out, you want to do your cost benefit analysis and stuff up front to make sure you're getting value out of it.
Yep.
And you will be sorely tempted to multiplex, which is to say, have one license, do this stuff that a bunch of people benefit from, and then also be stuff.
Yeah, which is what Eric was referring to. So.
Well, there is, it works.
Oh, we're.
All right, do I dare click this chat button and look at what Christian's posting here? Send a GIF. Why is it not loading in this window here? Oh, very nice.
User error.
And let's see the other one here.
This one's a little scarier.
Are you cosplaying as something there, Christian? Like, I'm not sure.
When your demo wasn't working, when it was going wrong, I was just trying to find something, and that was an option.
I'm still not going to click your YouTube links though, so I'll save those for later.
The Tina Turner video.
All right, well, that's all I had. So if there's no other questions.
Pass the word about, what do we call it, collab days?
Community days, collab days, M365 Friday.
Today the Microsoft Champions call.
Oh, good. And so come to collab days for SharePoint Saturday and Friday, and your official internal name.
Yes.
If you know somebody that wants to sponsor that, we're still looking.
Yep, we do have a number of sponsors. I think most everyone in the room is probably registered. If you haven't, now is the time. What?
I need to register.
Kevin needs to register. I just barely registered like 3 days ago when I was.
We have, as of right the beginning of this hour, we have 51 registrations so far.
So, and this is coming off. Yeah.
Christian, I think you already put the QR, the link in the
The
chat.
link in
right?
there. He put it to the community site, so there is a register link that kicks us over to Eventbrite here. Is there a QR?
So go to collabdays. Communitydays.org. And it shows up on that.
Yeah. Communitydays.org. And if we scroll down just a little bit, we should see Utah showing up here. We're almost there. There we go. Utah.
I just put a
Look for the
QR
mountains.
code in the chat.
Look at you. Wow.
Look at that. Nice big QR code.
That takes you to the sponsor tab, but you're at the site. You can register. You can see everything there.
We will give a courtesy shout out to our lovely sponsors, Journey Team, Platinum, thank you, Sovereign SP. I know Ben was hoping to join today, or Ron, did we get anyone from Sovereign? Does not look like it. So, but they're usually around, they're great. Unimax, I don't know who Unimax is. Christian, did you?
It's a
them contact?
UC company, so they're sponsoring the Comms V Next in Denver in April, and so they decided to come over the hill and sponsor us as well.
Awesome.
Designate unified communication.
I love it. And then some community sponsors. So Techie Gurus, Collab Talk, Christians associated with both of them, and Aptigent. I didn't really know who they were either. So
Yeah, Aptigent is Eric Shoup, so the North America
Okay.
Cloud Collaboration Summit. So his little software company, that he can't be there in person, but he's a web sponsor as well.
Awesome. Good stuff.
And we may have Crow Canyon coming out as well. So I've got to follow up with Scott Restivo.
Crow Canyon. They've sponsored
Yeah.
quite a few in the past. They're great.
Yeah. He just dropped me a note.
That would be awesome. But yeah, it's a full day event. Great networking, great training. Lunch will be provided. So come hang out with us. There is not a better way to spend your Friday on April 19th.
There is. It's called Hawaii. So, yeah.
So Friday, April 19th. Come join us. There is a share ski often, either the day before or after. I don't know as though it's been talked about. I don't know if one's been planned. Has one been planned?
There might be some snow levels.
There might be some slush. There's also often a share pint after the event. So
Yeah, we're doing share
Group it
pint.
together.
We're still organizing figuring out the location. So like, I'm not sure who took that, if Ron's driving that as well, but
I don't know. But yeah, there will be more than enough to keep you well engaged. So come join us. Woohoo! 52.
Yeah.
hey, got to drop.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
See you, Christian.
Bye.
I'm gonna kill the recording as long as,
Should kill the recording.
I can always edit it later. I want to say, I might steal something from Kevin from this meeting when he was talking about people going rogue.